So I have the alternator off of my 2004 Mini Cooper S. This is not as complicated as it looks, but yes, you do have to take the whole front off and put it in this little service mode thing to access the alternator and other things that are stuck on the front of the engine. This was making a squeaking sound that was like a really quiet nails on a chalkboard, and it was driving me insane. My microphone was messed up for this video, so I'm just doing a voiceover. Unfortunately, you can't hear the squeaking, but yeah, in order to get the pulley off, you just use a 22mm socket or a 7/8 and just use an impact gun. And it's just as simple as that. You definitely don't want to be sticking screwdrivers into the housing to try and stop any of the rotating assembly from rotating. So anyway, now we're going to take it apart. It's just a bunch of 8mm and 110mm nut. For now. That little piece is broken. Just removing the housing nuts. Now there's 4 Phillips head screws that hold the wires on there, and they're pretty much going to strip, so you're going to want some screw extraction pliers. These are Vamp Pliers Pro. I'll put a link in the description where you can get those. I would not have been able to do this without those. Now you can start working the alternator apart. The rear bearing is pressed in, so it's pressed into this little back part of the housing. So that's why it's a little hard to get out, and there you can see the bearing that is on the shaft. Spinning it now. And you can just smack this side with a hammer to press the other shaft out of the larger front bearing, the drive bearing they call it. There we go. This bearing, it looks like it spins really smoothly, but it is dry. And that's what was squeaking. And now you've got the front side. You can see the large bearing in there. Gotta take those 4 bolts out. I think they're 8mm. 8mm bolts. Just take those out. You should use a press for this, but you can smack it out with a hammer. And make sure you do not lose these little brushes here. So this is that large the large drive bearing. It's made by WBD, and the part number is B30-42D. I found one available on Amazon. There were none available to me locally, but the measurements are 17mm inner bore by 52mm outer diameter by I think 16 millimeters thick. So if you find one that is those dimensions, that will work. Now here's the smaller bearing. It's also made by WBD. The brand doesn't really matter on the new bearing. This code is 6202D. And I actually have to cut mine off because I don't have the proper kind of press or puller to pull it off. And it's not really a big deal to cut it off. Just get out the Dremel and just chop it off. Just cutting off the outer ring first. The little bearings pop out. And then the inner ring will get cut so that I can spread it apart and pop it off of there. And you don't want to use a lot of force if you're going to pry against this fin thing. The fan, I guess. And I am not using a lot of force there, so don't get worked up. So there's that. There's the new bearing. I will put a link in the description where you can get one. Anyway, to get the new bearing on, I used a socket that matches the inner ring of the bearing. Don't let the inside of the socket hit the edge of this shaft here. These copper parts are fragile, and I didn't realize that the inside of the socket was hitting it, but fortunately I didn't do enough damage. So I used the ring from the old bearing as a spacer so that I could get the new bearing on the rest of the way. So I just tapped this one back in with a 36mm socket that fits around the outside ring of the bearing. Now I'm just going to put it back together. It's pretty simple. The hardest part is holding these brushes in while you put the two outer pieces of the housing together. Basically just put some pressure on one side of the housing, hold the brushes in with your finger, and hammer the other side of the housing, and it'll work itself together. Thanks for watching. Hit the like and subscribe.